So yeah, congratulations on everyone getting through another politics conference. So just to preface quickly this conversation, I want to just throw out a couple of numbers here that I found pretty incredible, considering how much, the amount of times greater this is than how much each candidate spent on their campaigns. But according to MediaQuant, Trump amassed $6.4 billion in earned media since July 2015. That number for Clinton was at $3.7 billion. Sanders also had a big number at $861 million, and Cruz also did pretty well at just under $500 million. So with those, I think, pretty staggering numbers, maybe I'll just hand it over to you guys to introduce yourselves very quickly, and your names, what you do, and how you guys were involved in this cycle.
Sure. My name is Luis Calderon. I was the Director of Arts, Culture, and the Youth Vote on the Bernie Sanders campaign. After the campaign ended, I went on to work with Rock the Vote as Vice President of Marketing and Creative.
My name is John Durham. I'm founder of a company called IQ Media. We were involved in both the DNC and the RNC, as well as the candidates' war room efforts, tracking earned media through the last cycle.
Zach Moffett, CEO of Targeted Victory. We run online advertising and general kind of strategy in the digital marketplace. And in 2016, we touched most of the top-tier Senate, House, governor races, and a couple of the presidentials. We did a lot of Ted Cruz's work through the primaries.
Alex Cattell, the founder of IJR, Independent Journal Review. We are a news site that really cut our teeth in this election cycle, get around 30 million uniques a month, and have led the way with social engagement around news content this cycle.
Great, thanks guys. So the first question I have has to do with the interaction between overall marketing strategy and earned media. So first, to the panel, at what point in your minds did earned media become a central part of the marketing strategy? And maybe if you have different ideas for either campaign, but when do you think that really became a pillar in strategy?
I mean, I'll speak to our campaign. I think that we, if you were to go back to the tapes there and look at it, so part of the narrative early on was, hey, it doesn't seem like the traditional media is going to give us any attention here, and you were in it to win it. So we just realized that this was where it was an uphill battle, and that it was going to be really important for us to not worry about that, but to just get out on the road, stay out on the road, and just connect with the voters and talk about their issues and create our own content that was spoke to those issues and to share them through the platforms that we had available to us. We didn't have very much money in the beginning, so it was really a very DIY, punk rock sort of approach to it, and it was super effective. But it was never really like a marketing strategy, we knew that we were going to do advertising. It was not going to, it was in the end going to just be like, we would hate wasting that money, but we had to do it, and we knew that creating real, genuine content and sharing it was what we were preferred to do.
When you have a single leader who the organization is so flat and they're moving so fast, you can't keep up with them. We found that in the primary a lot, that Trump would punch someone, and 12 hours later, like, the Republican operative would respond with a really great response, and Trump's like 3 messages past there, right? So they can't keep up with the speed he's moving at. And so I think the general theory was, that's fine, he's moving very blitzkrieg in the primaries. In the general, we'll spread him over 10 states and they'll slow him down, and that proved just not to be true, which is, I think, again, it's like he kind of ran through all these like truisms in media relations and how to respond, but I just don't think structurally, I mean, Hillary Clinton to me structurally felt a lot more like the Romney campaign in 12, where like you wanted to get everything right, and your policy person had to read the tweet, and the comms people, and if you're structured like that, you'll never make any mistakes, but by definition you become brittle, and that's a challenge because everything's like multiplied, whereas Trump could say the same thing differently in an interview, and it almost confused people, like where to. I mean, that's why there's fact checkers. I mean, they crushed us in 12 with fact checking.
Totally.
Fact check kind of fell apart. They don't even spell check. I mean, they're moving that fast. They're not even spell checking.
Exactly. There's no spell check. Fact checker if you want, I guess. And on our campaign, we're doing live tweeting. Senator was watching the debates and going along with it, and that was new, and that's definitely not like, and it was him, him in the digital team, but it was definitely the photo of him on his phone, and you feel like this guy is really doing it, and so I feel there's a lot of similarities between the Sanders campaign and the Trump campaign in that we were in it live, and it didn't feel like he was mentioning, having to have it vetted and run through comms, and it's 3 days later.
Everyone looks at the solution as just the one-off, but it also is all the things that impact as a result. Like I always thought Christie did this really well. Chris Christie, his videos, he was so over the top that he kind of got away with that. So when they made typos and other things, and so he was like the precursor of what was coming, and then Trump was like, we thought it was kind of like the Cruz campaign. We thought Cruz was where the it of the party was. It turns out Trump was. It was like one step beyond. So we thought he was on the cutting edge, and then it turned out like someone out-Trumped that.
Yeah, but I think it's really interesting. I don't think anyone could do this. You have to have that personality. The people want to buy into that type of personality, so it's not like a model that everyone should go with. If we were running, it'd probably be a bad idea for us to just really tell everyone what we really think. You kind of get out of the game early on. I think it's just really interesting that in the end of the day, there's few people that are able to get away with that, to have that sort of personality and be as bombastic as they are, and throw away all of the old rules about how you're supposed to do this, how you're supposed to communicate.
Yeah, there's actually a couple questions ahead of where I wanted to be, but I think this is a perfect time to talk about, is it, who or what is it about Trump? I mean, we've spoken a little bit about that, but what is it about Trump, and what is it about Sanders as well, that made earned media such a central part of their campaign? And what would someone else that is not either of those two need to show, let's say maybe in 2020 or 2024, in order to harness that the way that these two candidates did?
Yeah, I think that for our campaign, it was the realization that there are not really two types of voters. It's very nuanced, and I think the senator is, always realized and understood that speaking to the audience, speaking to the voters about the issues that were really important to them, always keeping the issues up front, always about the issues. And it became for our campaign, and it became pretty popular. And not, this isn't about me, this is about us. That was the message that really resonated with our base, and it was refreshing. It was the first time in a long time that people could really feel like this is what we're talking about at home around our dinner tables, and we're talking about it on the daily, and it doesn't feel like these canned talking points.
I don't know what input they were getting that gave them that comfort level that that's what they should continue to double down on.
It's interesting you say that, because I don't think that we paid attention to any polls whatsoever. We did not run spots against any candidate whatsoever. That was another part of our campaign. We just weren't going to run negative ads in any way, shape, or form. And so there were two pieces that we ran that I think were some say the best campaigns leading up to it. But there was the first was America, Simon and Garfunkel song. It was just the song, and then clips of all types of Americans, and that was it. It was never an attack on anyone. It was just the song spoke for itself, and there was the idea of building. There's an America that exists today that is really there, that we can get to that point. And then there was another spot that we ran that was with a group that I worked with of supporters, that was a supporter generated spot called Together, where these guys took one of the senator's speeches and then cut just images over it of just multiple faces and pictures of families, and that was it. It was just a speech about an altruistic sort of bigger vision of America, and then Americans' faces cut to it, and that's what we ran. And I think those were two really great spots.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up the F-bomb here, like Bob Garfield did a couple panels ago. Fake news. And I'm just kind of curious on your thoughts about what kind of connection there may be between the emergence of earned media and maybe its influence on the overall news cycle, but also specifically on fake news, whatever that may be at this point.
What he did, though, was he would change the subject. I think what he did masterfully is he wouldn't respond to the charge. He would change the subject. Like, okay, you're getting questioned on your business ties and the conflicts. Let's have Kanye West show up at the bottom of Trump Tower. Let's change the entire narrative. I think that's what he did better than anyone, because he realizes news cycles now are like 15 minutes. I mean, things burn hot, but they burn fast, and he's already on to the next thing. And you talked about that. He's 3 messages down the road.
But I also think it's the consumer, right? It's the viewer, like, and do they care about the quality of the news? Does the consumer as an individual care about where is journalistic integrity in this clip? You know, because it wouldn't exist. If people who consume stop to actually read it and really say, this smells fishy, you know. We're just in a society where it's like go, 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 and I think, you know, Trump definitely realizes that and capitalizes off that, and is able to totally change it, you know.
I have one last question, but yeah, okay, cool. And this, again, getting a little bit into the weeds, but looking forward to 2020, 2024. I'm curious about your thoughts. Maybe, Zach, you have some insight on this, having worked on some campaigns, and Luis as well. Where do budgets go now? You know, how do budgets shift? And coming back to our first question, how do strategies shift now? You know, that we'll have a couple years to kind of figure out where this earned media idea takes us.
I would say, you know, my candidate was not necessarily.
He was entertaining.
But it wasn't like it was entertaining, but it was just natural and organic, and you know, there's like that expression, you judge a man by the cut of his suit. You know, his thing was like, why would I get the suit cut? Like, it's a waste of money. You know, so I guess that part was sort of entertaining, and it became pop culture. I would also wish that, you know, everything you just said about super PACs wasn't the case moving forward. That people could just, you know, not have to worry about the strategy in place 2 years before anyone wanted to run for politics and really run on behalf of their constituents on issues. You know what I mean? But this is the America that we're in, and so for I think progressives and I think Dems, like, you know, we really got to start thinking about this now, because the clock is ticking.
My point was that Republicans controlled Washington, and yet there was no campaign to change that control and make them the bad guys. I didn't see that campaign from Hillary. Instead, the campaign was, let's blow up Fox News, or let's blow whatever I'm in front of today. Let's blow up Washington because I'm Donald Trump. But I didn't see the alternative. I'm wondering if the alternative had been run, had they attacked the people who were actually running Washington for the last 6 years. Would that have been a different change story? Would that have been one that might have resonated with those people seeking?
I think we can dig far down this hole, but I would be clear that I don't think that anyone believes a party's in charge if they're not in charge of the White House. Like, it's a huge misconception. Like, we were still in charge of in 2006 when we got wiped out everywhere, we still ran the country because we had Bush in the presidency. Like, as everyone remembers, like, we still had that. Like, I would just think, like, for people who don't pay attention, it doesn't matter who controls the Senate and the House. Like, we can talk about it ad nauseum, but, like, that is a disconnect. And again, I think that's a Washington mentality of, like, well, we're in control. Like, they control the purse strings, or they control who the judicial, like, that is so lost on people.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Again, that's like the money ball and the small ball is where you miss the fact that, like, oh, we're playing like football, not baseball. Like, they got the thing completely wrong as they go through the process.
And I think, you know what, that's an excellent point, because real people have to work all the time. They don't have time to sit around and study this stuff, and, like, you know, you're working 50, 60 hours a week just to stay inside of a house or an apartment. You know, we don't have time. Regular people, American people, hardworking people don't have time to study, like, the nuances, and that's just the reality to it. There's an education rollout that should happen, but there's, you know, guess what? There's basic civics out there that we don't even know as Americans, you know, how the stuff actually works. And I think that, to your point about, you know, if you remember the last place where politics affected your own individual life, and in Midwest and Rust Belt, you know, that was some bad trade decisions, you know, and if you're struggling with work, and there's a guy who comes and says, I'm going to give you work, it's like very simple, you know, it's like, okay, because I need work, and these guys are sitting here telling me the same thing they've been telling me for decades now, and I could tell that they're, like, just not going to do that, you know. I mean, honestly, like, you know, and you see that throughout all of this stuff. I mean, it's just, you know, market to market. But when was the last time people went back to Flint, Michigan? You know, Flint, Michigan was a big storyline. when it was around Flint, Michigan, but no one's gone back to Flint, Michigan to talk about Flint, Michigan. Has anybody in media reported about Flint, Michigan? You know, and people in Flint, Michigan, guess what? They know that, you know, they were used in this, but in their real life, they still have terrible water, you know. And I think Americans, and that's something we all have to like look at. It's not to study these people as they're us, and they're working, and they're working really hard. And I think that's what between Trump and you know Sanders, you know, that's what our base really recognized, that these are people who are saying they're going to do something and they believed it.
Philip, panel, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. We have a.
Appreciate it. I'll keep it quick. Joe Schultz with Scripps. Just a quick thing. I think one of the unfortunate results of this election cycle is a perceived reduction in trustworthiness from our news outlets. Any thought on the impact that might have on earned media going forward in the next couple election cycles?
I do. I think, you know, I was talking to my kids the other day, and I said, when I watch the news, I watch Walter Cronkite, and he would say the news, and it was fact, right? And again, that's when the news was a program; it wasn't a network. And I think that I think there has to be a return to the fact-based news, and then the promotional news-type programs that can have their biases, and your audiences will be drawn to either agree or disagree, and ratings will be good. But I think there is a perception that news is biased, and I think that is not only at the national side, but it's also in the local markets that we're seeing. And people listen to the news and they want to get the facts right so that they can make the right decisions. And I think that there'll be more pressure towards middle of the road news. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not.
No, I think another takeaway is a lot like Congress is really unpopular. If you just say Congress as a whole, I don't trust Congress. But if you look at an individual congressman, your individual representative, it's a lot better. And I think what you're going to see in media is a lot of people that don't trust institutions will start to rely on individuals that they trust. They'll pay more attention to the bylines. They'll follow journalists specifically that they trust, regardless of what institution that they go to. And I think we're just at the infancy of this shift away from an institution of media, which was the only place that could distribute news and information, to every individual having their own distribution channel. And it applies to candidates. They can be their own media companies, but it also applies to the journalists themselves and
right.
to the media personalities themselves. They will be the source of news and information, and you either trust them or you don't, and they'll have their own reputation not tied to this larger institution. I think that is where we're headed, and we're just in the infancy of that shift.
Yeah, I think there'll be a newer, you know, iteration of what you're saying about that classic old school news, where it's just the news. It's delivered with a certain temperament. You know, it's not. There's no yelling. It's just the news, and it's for you to determine. Those days are gone. But I think that there's what we've seen, and especially if you think about young people, young voters specifically, like they're not. You know, people aren't paying attention to. You know, people aren't watching CNN. You know, they're like Young Turks. There's all these new media outlets that are popped up over the last couple of years.
InfoWars or something.
You know, all this stuff that individuals like. You know, people, individuals who have a large voice through Twitter or whatever, they become the news. And the role of journalists as independents, you know, it's all changing. So I think naturally it's evolving, and I think, you know, we'll see where it really lands in the next couple of years. But there's definitely a lot of players out.
Oh, great! The bubble's getting harder. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.